This is your Day X World War III update. If we want to understand what's coming, we need to be able to take a step back from all of the day-to-day tactical minutia. Okay, we need to be able to detach ourselves from the technicals, the tactical operational details, all of the little micro datas that we try to integrate into our big picture view of things, because oftentimes it's just conflicting, convoluted reports. It's misinformation, it's disinformation. It's, did the rocket hit here? Did it hit the hospital? Did it kill the civilians? Did the plane get shot down? Was it a cyber attack or was it? And you're running around like a general trying to police individually a million different privates, or a guy doing technical analysis of every stock at the same time in order to effectively make valid predictions of the future. You have to take a step back every once in a while and just look at the grand chessboard and understand that ultimately, what is the primary concern with what we've been fixated on in this channel for the last couple years? Well, it's been global conflict. That has been the central concern, which is not to say there's not a lot of other sub-concerns and related concerns that are adjacent to that, like economic crises, potential for biological warfare, cyber warfare, etc., etc. But primarily our fixation is an inexorable nuclear conflagration. Now, this nuclear conflagration will be the result of a game of nuclear chicken that is currently ongoing. And it has become blisteringly evident to me that the United States military's flippancy and dismissiveness with how they are approaching the grievances of Russia and their nuclear posture is incredibly alarming. And I think it's saying more than just that they are viewing themselves as exceptional individuals who don't have to worry about that sort of thing. This is not American exceptionalism. It starts to actually look like they have a plan. Take, for example, Patrick Ryder, Defense Secretary or Press Secretary for the Pentagon. Today, in his commentary on the Russians altering their nuclear doctrine, when pressed by the press, he responded with a very nonchalant response, almost dismissing it outright, okay, as just being mere rhetoric that is not even worthy of more than a 10-second soundbite. Think about that. Russia is currently being invaded, the biggest nuclear power, and the reason why this bears repeating is the same reason why we get so caught up in the technicals, right? We forget about the big picture here. Why is Sergei Lavrov talking about altering their nuclear doctrine? Could it have something to do with the fact that we've been hammering elements of their nuclear triad? We literally have Ukraine as the sponsored battering ram into Russia's, I guess they would be their southwestern flank, and they are currently targeting inside Russia, left and right, critical infrastructure. I'm watching videos today of farm combines being hit, clear violations of the Geneva Convention, and rumors of potential attacks on nuclear reactors. But even that, again, it's always conflicting reports. And if you go down that rabbit hole, you lose sight of the big picture. The big picture is this: if Russia wins this war, the US dollar precipitously collapses. We know it's only a matter of time before that happens anyways, in light of developments around the world and lack of developments here, which is not to say that America is going to collapse outright. The British Empire didn't collapse outright. It used to be 85% of the currency that was traded around the world. After World War II, it collapsed. It's still there. America doesn't necessarily need to collapse, but will the American collapse be worse? Because, of course, our debt is a hell of a lot bigger than Great Britain's was, proportionately, jet to GDP ratio anyways. So consider that if Russia wins this war, they expand into Ukraine, okay? they become a greater, stronger economic power bloc, which triggers a Cold War in Europe. I mean, that's baked into the cake. And that also, of course, is going to continuously empower China. They're going to continuously build more pipelines. If the United States cannot stop Russia, this is their point of view. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying that this is the material reality. If the United States cannot stop Russia, the United States' economic hegemony ends. Now, if the United States can stop Russia, then Russia likely pulls the nuclear card. If the United States is going to lose, will we pull the nuclear card? Is it somewhere written in the subtext of our nuclear doctrine that the death of the dollar is an existential threat? For some people, they would say it most certainly is, because there are so many people's livelihoods around the world that are tied to American hegemony. Just look at the stock market. You think that's all American dollars in there? That is foreigners investing in the stock market. That's what's been pumping up the stock market. It's the only place to go for a lot of people in the world, is to put your money into the US stock market to ensure you get a return. Now, all that aside, understand the situation on the ground right now. There is a remarkable amount of flippancy and dismissiveness on the part of the Pentagon with the nuclear, I shouldn't say nuclear, but the grievances of the Russian Federation with respect to our enabling of the Ukrainian battering ram that is hammering their nuclear triad, their nuclear radars, their critical infrastructure, and now they're invading the country with American weapons, mercenaries, and ISR. They have a problem with that. And if you've seen Patrick Ryder in the press conference today, he's the press secretary for the Pentagon, the way that he so nonchalantly only allots a mere 15-second response to this issue that has prompted Russia to go from occasional mutterings and reminders that they're a nuclear power to a complete revision of their nuclear doctrine, whilst doing tactical nuclear drills with neighboring Belarus in and around the region. In fact, they're sandwiching the Kerch region with tactical nuclear weapons on a trigger, okay? So they are ready to fire. And you have Lavrov saying that we're changing our nuclear doctrine. You're pushing us, you're pushing us. Okay, the F-16s are a nuclear-capable platform. You keep pushing us. You keep crossing red lines. You keep trying to attack the Kerch Bridge. You're trying to attack the Kursk nuclear power plant. You keep trying to do these things over and over. And here we are just completely flippant about it. Now, some people would say that that is the result of American exceptionalism, that we think that we're invincible. I would say otherwise. I think they have a plan. When you really start to look at the way that things are shaping up, about a year ago, when they were, maybe not quite a year ago, I guess almost a year ago now, when they started moving all those warships into the Mediterranean right after October 7th, when there was a very high likelihood that Israel was going to go to war with Lebanon at that point in time, they moved all those warships to the Mediterranean. And I said in a video that I thought, that is remarkably close to the Bosphorus Strait and where you enter into the Black Sea, which of course would bring many of those warships and those big boomer nuclear submarines that are lurking around everywhere. It would bring them very, very close to the Russian mainland. Now you have very well-respected pundits in the space starting to resurrect that idea. And they reminded me that recently, if you recall, Russian nuclear radars in the southern part of the country, the ones that would oversee Iranian operations and be able to assist in that direction, the Russians claim that they're still operational. Some people say they've been compromised. Again, it's all tactical minutia. Let's not argue it to death. Knowing that those things have been compromised and knowing that we now, once again, have the heaviest hitting naval arsenal in that region, closer to the part of Russia that really matters. Let's face it, the populous part of Russia that has all the industry, maybe not the nuclear bunkers at Mount Yamnuska or whatever it's called, but, you know, it's where all the stuff is. It's where the Russian military is, primarily. You have this agglomeration of American forces in and around that region. That makes you wonder if they don't have a plan to do it, to go for broke. Now, how they would justify it to the population if they were to really engage in a preemptive strike, a decapitation strike on Russia, and what would it take to legitimate their doing so, I don't know. But it really starts to look like people just think they're going to walk away from this. I mean, that is look, I don't care if it's Trump or whoever. You don't walk away from a situation like this. You already done shot yourself in the foot. The Russians have now said they're not going to negotiate. Now, the Russians have said before that there's no point in negotiating. They've said that. They said, what's the point of negotiating? Now they are definitively saying, we're not going to negotiate. After the Kursk invasion, that is still ongoing, by the way, we're not going to negotiate. And we really don't know what's going on there. Some people are saying 6,000 Ukrainians have died and the Donbass front is collapsing and it's all over for Ukraine. No, it's not all over for Ukraine. Don't think for a second that they're just going to roll over like that. What's going to happen is that Westerners are going to come in and fill the ranks and fill the gaps in the system. And they're going to fill it with JSOMs, missiles, the, what are they called? The surface to air or what are they called again? I don't know the actual meaning. Somebody can write it in the description, but they're the longer range, heavier ordnance missile that you would put on the F-16 that is going to enable Ukraine to potentially target deeper into Russia. But that's neither here nor there, because as I explained yesterday, Ukraine is already starting to warm people to this idea that they have new technology, new Wonderwaffe that is going to help them strike deep into Moscow. And stealthy even, and ballistic missiles, and yada, yada, yada. So we know that escalation is going to come in some shape or form. Are they going to attempt to do something very, very crazy? Or are they just going to wait until the result of the election, which doesn't matter anyways? Because in the long run, you're going to either get the best case scenario at this point is a very aggressive, permanently on the edge of our seat Cold War in Europe for the foreseeable future. Okay, that is the best case scenario at this point in time. You don't just walk away from this. So in addition to that, we have what's going on in Iran. Let's just remember what's going on in Iran. Right now, all of the rumors are that they're days away, potentially, if they so chose, to create a nuclear weapon. They are maybe a couple days more away from creating multiple nuclear weapons, and so on and so forth. There was another report released today that they could have 14 nuclear warheads within 5 months. They have the deployment systems, and now they have a lot of other Russian technology, which is emboldening them to take on the Israelis and the Americans. Every single day for the past 3 or 4 weeks, some official source within one of the Western governments has put forth evidence to suggest that Iran is going to attack Israel any day now. And it's almost as if they're keeping this up so to keep their own population in a state of permanent dread and panic about what's coming so that they don't revolt there in Israel. So it serves a purpose. It creates this sense that, you know, catastrophe is always coming, because Netanyahu knows that as soon as the war stops and as soon as there's any sort of conciliatory action taken, that he's gone, okay, that the protests are going to begin again. But so long as he can keep people scared and in the bunkers, which is why you need that boogeyman like Iran, then he'll be able to keep people off the streets. But what's more than that is this is all tied in to the big meta perspective. It is a love triangle. Understand, China stands to benefit from Russia fighting the United States. Russia stands to benefit from Iran fighting the United States. Okay, Russia stands to benefit from China fighting the United States. They're just waiting, and it looks like Jake Sullivan basically was sent packing with not much to show for his trip to China so far. So it's looking as though that the Chinese are not willing to play into whatever sort of scheme of kick the can down the road until after the elections or after such and such happens, then we can start a big war. The Chinese aren't buying it, okay? And I think that the American empire's time is up. And as I heard somebody suggest today, it may be us who do the strike first, who are first to initiate, out of desperation, some sort of nuclear attack. The question is, how would we ever in a million years be able to justify that to the population, or do they even care? The scale of event that they would need, it would have to be so egregious and appalling that the scale of a flashbulb event, as I call it, a flashbulb memory, is something where you remember where you were when it happened. They would have to do something so insane that created so much of an uproar amongst people here in the West that we demanded something be done. Okay, it would, and right now that bar has been set pretty high. After what we've seen in Gaza, how desensitized people have been towards death and destruction, sure, the media can turn it on. We all know that if they want to, they can make us care about shit that we didn't care about an hour ago. We know that. The media has the power to do that. And we're partly to blame because, of course, on social media, people get going and, oh, this is something I should be concerned about. Okay, I'm going to tweet about it too, right? They're going to have to do something incredibly drastic at this point in time. And I can only imagine it being something that involves unconventional weapons. Chemical weapons just doesn't have the same kick that it used to. Okay, it just doesn't. I mean, there's even rumors that they've been used all throughout this conflict in lower doses across the front line, and nobody's even cared. Okay, so we're talking about a nuclear or radiological, and even an attack on a nuclear plant at this point in time, I don't even think that wakes anybody up. Okay, you got all of the banks and everybody after Nvidia crashes today talking about higher price targets just to desperately try to keep the whole facade going as unemployment goes up, as the price of housing reaches record levels, as inflation is being hidden, the true inflation that is still currently ongoing, which is becoming just, I just don't know how people are surviving. I don't know how I could have survived 10 years ago when I was working a 9-to-5 job. I just don't know how people do it. You gotta work 2 jobs, but it's still gonna be better than when the shit hits the fan. That's why I encourage people to milk whatever you can from this system while you can, okay? Because it's not going to be here forever. We know that in recent days, there was an explosion at the Isfahan, near Isfahan, near a military complex there. That's in Iran, one of the towns that is associated with their nuclear program. Okay, we know that Iran has been given S-400 capabilities, electronic warfare capabilities. There was some speculation that they were even given Iskander missiles, which of course are nuclear-ready missiles from Russia. But again, that is not proven entirely yet, mostly based on anecdotal stuff. And of course, that would imply that Russians were there helping the Iranians. We know that Iran has showcased hypersonic missile systems. We know that they recently got a very large shipment of anti-ship missiles. We know that the American Abraham Lincoln Strike Carrier Group and probably a lot of nuclear submarines are just off the coast of Iran in the Persian Gulf and in and around the Red Sea and the Mediterranean and the entire Middle East. We know that traffic through the Suez Canal has all but ground to a halt, okay? We know that situation is still escalating in Israel in the West Bank, they're opening up a new front. Of course, they're blaming it on the Iranians, of course. And we also know that Gallant, today, Yoav Gallant, the defense minister, said that they're getting ready to go into Lebanon, that we need to open the northern front to ensure the safe return of the people who've been evacuated from there. So I'm under no illusions that this thing is slowing down whatsoever. This is why, just like a technical trader will look at the ebbs and flows from day to day and be pulling their hair out because their stock isn't going up continuously every single day. With trend forecasting, we really have to take these macro things into perspective, okay? China needs oil in the Middle East, so they have a vested interest in Iran not going to war and war not happening within that region. They do, however, have a vested interest in Russia continuing to fight Ukraine. So that conversation between Xi Jinping and Jake Sullivan, the top tier guys, okay, really in the administrations right now in terms of negotiating, what were they really talking about? Is China going to, encourage Russia or encourage the United States to escalate that situation on that front if it thinks it can gain the upper hand? Now, there is, unfortunately, a dirty secret with that, though, because, China might be of the impression that the Americans and the Russians are going to fight it out until they're completely depleted. What's likely going to happen is that they're going to get cut in the crosshairs as well. Because as the theory goes, if there is a nuclear war between Russia and the United States, they're going to fire nukes at everybody else too, because they don't want them coming into power at a later time. So if a war broke out between Russia and the United States, they wouldn't just be lobbing nukes at each other, because what happens when they diminish their own military capacities and China is still relatively unscathed? Well, China is going to immediately take over the world. They're going to be the dominant force in the world. You can't have that. So you got to throw a few at Beijing as well. And maybe a few at India as well. And some of the other big players. And of course, Europe is just gone, right? So this is something to keep in mind, is that the big picture indicates that there's no way this ends without a bang or a whimper. All we can hope is that it ends with a whimper and not a bang at this point in time. There was a nuclear Sniffer plane identified flying over Los Angeles today. The U.S. National Nuclear Security Augusta 139 N2314 was doing base map readings and calibration missions over the LA area today. Now, if you recall, a few months ago, I notified you of a massive exercise, a wargaming exercise taking place by all branches of government to talk about how to coordinate logistics post-nuclear event in Los Angeles County. Now, why are they thinking about that with just Los Angeles? Are they worried about the North Koreans? Are they worried about the thing with China breaking out? Is that really what they're worried about here? A lot of people think that they've abandoned the Eastern Front in the Pacific because they're sending all of the military assets into the Middle East. Well, they still have a very sizable force in those regions that could easily survive long enough until a lot of those other carrier strike groups got there. But it's not looking good for the United States and their ability to effectively police the international waterways, okay? I think our days are numbered, and that the U.S. naval force as a global hegemon is not long for this world. In Ukraine, some of the tactical minutia, the F-16 that got shot down. Was it a Ukrainian pilot that went down? Was it, where was it shot down? Was it shot down by a Patriot missile defense system? Was it shot down by a Russian Su-57? None of it's been confirmed by the one and only almighty Pentagon yet, so we'll never know the official narrative, but everybody has their own conflicting narratives about that. Ukraine claims that Russia is attacking its power plants, But what Russia is trying to do, and they're trying to surgically navigate this, because they're trying to put Ukraine in the dark for winter, and they're getting very close to succeeding. The problem is a lot of Ukraine is powered by nuclear. And should Russia start targeting nuclear power plants in order to deal the final death blow to the electrical grid in Ukraine, then of course that would draw global condemnation, and they'd be even more of a pariah than they are right now. So they don't want to do that, but they are attacking the connected power systems and power plants that actually power the nuclear reactors themselves, the backup power supply. So they've been targeting those, and that's been having some effect. And according to the IAEA, who of course is in the back pocket of the collective transatlantic West, they are of course siding with the Ukrainians, and they absolutely will till the bitter end. And so we can't really reliably take what they say as fact. In terms of Russian progress on the front line, if you listen to the Russia bros, it's like blitzkrieg level. But when you actually look at it, I think at best they're moving maybe 20 square kilometers a day. Okay, so square kilometers and kilometers, big difference. Still much greater than the progress that they were making earlier in the year when it was 1 to 5 kilometers a day at best. So they're definitely making more progress. We have the Dutch approving the use of F-16s in pretty much any capacity that the Ukrainians want. But we don't know how many Dutch F-16s are there. And again, we probably will never know the exact amount of F-16s, because all they really need to say is they have one, and they can have an indefinite amount. That one could just keep respawning, just like a video game. There was an emergency meeting hosted by NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg, convening an emergency NATO-Ukraine Council at the request of Kiev. A representative of the North Atlantic Alliance had announced earlier today, this of course due with the collapsing front lines and the Kursk invasion and Ukraine's calls for the permission to utilize Western long-range weapons inside Russia, which again is kind of a red herring, because what they're going to do once they're rejected from that, eventually Germany will capitulate on the Taurus missiles. I mean, they've planted that there for a reason. It may happen after this election, possibly, once they gauge public sentiment. It would not take much, I think, to drum up anti-Russian sentiment in Germany. I know people think it's an impossibility right now, but I don't think it would. You know, sometimes these things, especially when people are under economic stress, they can flip the switch real quick. It's just going to take an event that's going to conjure up more collective memories of World War II or something like that. And, you know, all of a sudden, history is going to repeat. Russian banks are preparing for a major crisis. Get a load of this. The average key rate in Russia in 2025 may be 20 to 22% per annum. This may happen if external conditions deteriorate significantly. So right now, they're talking about global economic collapse unfolding as if it's a certainty in 2025. This is stated in the risk scenario published by the Bank of Russia under the main title, Main Directions of the Unified State Monetary and Credit Policy. Right now, they're trying to establish a plan for what they're saying is an imminent global economic crisis. Now, likewise, interestingly, and perhaps Sullivan had something to say about this too, although I doubt it, I think he's more about military matters. China and the United States are also in talks to establish an emergency economic channel for communication. Why would you need an emergency economic channel unless you were expecting things to happen really, really fast? And I would implore people, especially if you're in finance, to look into that arrangement further. There wasn't much about it in the news, but essentially the United States and China are working together in order to create a more accessible back channel of communications should some very acute economic crisis arise. Okay, there was a major cyber attack in the Netherlands which took down some of the operating systems that oversee police, emergency services, aspects of the government, and the military. It's still unknown whether or not it was a cyber attack or not. I'm going to chalk it up to it probably was, okay? Because indeed, the Dutch at this point in time are no friends of the Russians when they're getting ready to provide Ukraine the F-16s to fly sorties into Moscow and target their nuclear triad. So just understand, really, that this is a game of nuclear chicken. And it's very easy to just relegate this all to cartoony land. I get it. You know, Russians talking about shooting nukes. It just sounds fantastical. But at the end of the day, that's what this is. Okay, that's the final play. And right now, if Russia is winning, they might just say to themselves, you know what? We're just going to coast no matter what the provocation that the West throws at us, that they know they will. Because if you do believe that Ukraine is genuinely losing, do you truly think that they've invested hundreds of billions of dollars into this enterprise just to let it go just like that? It's not going to happen, okay? Not in the span of such a short period of time. People will bring up Afghanistan and how much money was spent there. That was over a much longer period of time. This is a much shorter timeline with a greater amount of support, and that is only going to continue. The gap will be filled by the West. There will be some land concessions made, but there's going to be something very drastic that has to happen in order to bring the West into the conflict. And all the conditions are ripe for that right now. Whether it's Poland's increasingly higher level of readiness, Belarus moving its military towards the borders, the Russians fighting in their own country with Ukrainians who continue to push, leveraging all kinds of new AI technology and Western ISR. And it was leaked today, not leaked, it was just openly stated that the CIA had conversations with Ukraine prior to the invasion. I mean, if you even need to have any confirmation of that at this point, you're just not making the right inferences, okay? That's exactly what is going on. Now, I don't know when any of this is going to come to pass, okay? We're well overdue for our weekly unprecedented event on a scale never before seen by humanity. So I think that's probably going to come any hour now, to be brutally honest, in the next few days anyways. You know, something big is going to break again. Gold closed for a record high once again today. You know, no big deal, right? It's been actually trading sideways, but just slightly ticking up 1 or 2 points higher every day. All we can do, my friends, is continue to be vigilant, continue to prepare, but enjoy our lives. We try to have a lot of fun on the channel. It's not all daily dose of doom and gloom. Go watch our blue strip videos. We have a hell of a lot of fun, okay? And, you know, I make those videos for my kids so that at the end of the day, you know, if I do go in an untimely fashion, then they can look back and they can watch those videos and they can enjoy the experiences we had because, you know, I commit a lot of my life to this process. And it's a choice that I make because it's intriguing. And I do it not just for myself. I do it for my family. I do it for my kids. I do it for the people who I employ. Okay. But at the end of the day, you got to take a breather from this stuff or else it's going to burn you out. Understanding that fear is a great initial motivator. It's a great trigger. It's a great spark. But you can't fuel a fire on fear indefinitely. It's a marathon. So you have to enjoy the process. So we enjoy building out a homestead. We enjoy growing our food. Okay, we enjoy just doing work out in the land and being out in nature. These are things that I enjoy. So even though I'm in a grind right now because I'm trying to get as much done as fast as I possibly can because I know how precious time is right now because we are so damn close to one side doing something incredibly stupid. So I always try to grind. I'm not frolicking in the woods. I don't have that bushcraft zen like some people do. Okay, when I'm out there, I'm working, I'm grinding. Occasionally I smell the roses though, and you should too. So don't let this stuff drive you crazy, guys. Watch some of our lighter content. We got a bit of that coming your way. We always do on the channel. It's just that people just want to be scared. But and I think the problem is with that is that, again, that's a sprint. You can run faster scared, but for how long? It's a marathon. This is a marathon. And if you want to truly be ready for the end of the world as we know it, Teotwalki, the big day X, okay? When everybody just fires everything at once. If you want to be truly ready for that day, it is going to take blood, sweat, and tears, and not just fears, fears, fears. Take care, my friends. If you want to support the channel, you know where to do it.